Kevin. What's Kevin's last name? Gleason. Kevin Gleason. So he's going to talk about abusing SA tools for internet collaboration. I underscore the app because if there's a tool, it will be abused. And Tom, go ahead. And also remember that we will break at some point for a raffle to raffle the book, and maybe Tom can find a stopping point and do the raffle.
Sure, sounds good. I noticed there was some discussion over this Unix code, so before I begin, I'm going to explain it. I explained it earlier, and I apologize to people who have heard this already. So this is an interview question that I use where I work. The question is, what does this shell code do? And it's valid in C shell and bash and K shell and bin sh and stuff. So supposing that A and B exist already, the first thing that happens, well, maybe I should give it away first and then explain. It swaps two files without using a temporary file. So this opens B, but there's no one reading from B yet, so it just holds the file handle open. And you know, in Unix, a file that is opened by a process and held open, you can delete it, and the operating system still has that file open. When that process finally gets around to reading it, then it'll read it. And the file doesn't get deleted until the last file handle closes. So B is being held. This deletes B and renames A to B. So now we've done the first half of the swap. A has been moved to B. And then cat, well, now we finally are reading from B, and cat is sending its output to A, completing the swap. So, okay. So that answers that question. The other question I usually get is, don't you work at a security company? Why does that security company let you travel around talking about a book? The reason is, we have a very technical product, and we like to have people at our company that can be known for doing very technical things. And so it's part of our PR campaign that we have authors. Our chief scientist is Bill Cheswick, who wrote a book about firewalls that some of you might have read. And who? Bill Cheswick? Yeah. So his second edition will be out soon, and the last time he said that was 2 years ago, but this time they've set a hard deadline. Basically, whatever they're done in October is going to the printer, so early next year. It takes a while to get these things to the bookstore. So, it really is. They declared feature freeze. And people ask, if you could forgive me, I'm going to give a 2-minute plug about what the company I work for does, because we're small and we need all the PR we can get. We're a company called Lumeta, and we do a number of security tools that are useful to intranet. So one of the tools we do is a firewall analyzer. It takes your rule set from your PIX firewall or Checkpoint or Cisco ACLs and maybe some others soon, and generates a set of HTML pages that are an audit of your rule set. Now, I think most people here are from academia, but in the corporate world, a lot of corporations now employ teams of auditors that audit every corporate firewall on an annual basis. And some of these companies have thousands of firewalls. And it takes them about a week to do this audit. This tool does most of the brain work for them and cuts that down to about 1 day. And you can PGP encrypt your rule set, email it to us, and we batch process it and send it back and charge you $2 grand, or you could buy a box that'll actually do the process for you. And then you could, I guess, run your own company charging $2,000. The other thing we do is, Bill Cheswick is also known for his internet maps. And so a lot of people say, well, how much money do you make selling those internet maps? You know, it can't really be that much. And that's not where our business is. We do those internet maps of people's intranets. So we connect on the inside of their firewall, do the map, and it's not just about pretty pictures. Along the way, the data we collect to generate that map contains a lot of really valuable security information. We take this back to the SOC, the Security Operations Center. We do a number of analyses of the data and give you a report that shows all sorts of things. The big thing that we find is rogue internet connections. So if you have a large corporate internet with some draconian, firewall policy, chances are you have dozens of people that have figured out ways to get their own private internet connection or a VPN or something, and we can detect those using some patent-pending techniques. And we give you this great report that says, hey, here's the 50 people that are breaking your policy. And at one company, we found what we call a class 2 leak, which when we did a reverse DNS lookup of the IP address, it was like hotsexybabes.com. So, I guess this guy didn't need a raise that year because he was certainly making enough money with his little e-commerce site. But that company had one less employee the next day. Anyway, thank you for indulging me talking about the company I work for. The talk goes by a couple different names. It's also how to write a book with someone you don't know. I try not to have this talk be a big sales pitch for the book. What this talk is really about is the process that went into writing a book. It's almost 800 pages. It was sort of a difficult project. And I think some of the techniques we used were interesting. So my co-author is, it's a little cut off, but Christine Hogan is this wonderful system administrator who I didn't know when we began writing the book. And so we had a lot of interesting technical challenges. An alternative title is Why is Writing a Book Like System Administration? And is that contrapositive? I got a C in that class. Why is system administration like writing a book? So, don't you hate overview slides? So how is it similar to writing a book? Well, we addressed it in many ways like a software project. From the tools we use SSH and CDS and Make. I'll talk more about these later. But also, once you've done system administration for long enough, you start to realize that learning the commands, which you used to think, gee, system administration, if I could learn every command in Unix, I'd be the best system administrator in the world. Well, you start to learn that that's not really true. The manual is always going to help you if you can't remember what option to cat puts a $sign at the end of each line. Who knows? Who knows? Oh, so, girls, he's already taken. Sorry.
That's what got invented, man pages.
Exactly. So the real sysadmin skills, when you become a more advanced system administrator, are along the lines of project management and negotiation and communication and customer service and dealing with bosses and dealing with subordinates. So writing this book, we had to make a lot of system administrator-like decisions. We had to plan a security policy, plan network issues, network performance, and reliability and data integrity issues. So, so we're going to talk about those various things. First, I keep saying first. I've said first 3 times so far. So we had to pitch when you want to write a book, first you find a bunch of publishers and you pitch your idea and you get taken out to lunch, and that's great. And so we were, this is like if you've seen the movie The Player, where everyone's pitching ideas for Hollywood movies. We get a big name like Tom Cruise, and it's going to be the first of its kind. It's going to have, it's going to be the book that's about the things that are the same for every operating system, like negotiation and communication and stuff, without being really specific about commands. And that sounded too wonky, so we sort of backed up and said, well, it's the book that's going to be about all operating systems, the things that are common for all operating systems. And as I say here, the final result overlaps about 80% with our original proposal. Here's some quotes from the proposal. Actually, the best one is this. There is no command in Unix or NT that magically helps a system administrator understand what their customers want or executes on plans developed. This book will develop those skills. So this is sort of a master's level system administration book. Each chapter has the exact same format. Of course, you have your introduction, conclusion, and exercises. But each basically has two halves. The basics of that topic and the icing. The basics are those fundamental key issues that you have to deal with. For example, on backups, that would be capacity planning and policy and cost and budgeting. And then icing is those issues that you really shouldn't even try if you haven't gotten the basics right first. So for backups, that might be, well, one of the basics for backups is they need to be sufficiently automated. And icing would be automated to the point where you don't need to touch the tape jukebox for a month or so, or off-site backups being automated, these kind of things. So one of the best pieces of advice I got about a month before we shipped the book was Bill Cheswick, who I mentioned earlier, said, I think 13 chapters is the perfect size for a book. If you pick the topic, you pick 12 things you'd like to say about that topic, and you write one chapter each and slap on an introduction. That's really the right size for a book. And I said, thanks, Phil. Ours was 32 chapters and 3 appendi. It's so big that I can't list them all in a linear list. I've sort of paragraphized them. But we did break it into 4 sections. The principles, which is sort of the rudiments. The processes, which is really about making change. The process of controlling change, controlling the chaos, change from the micro view, changing one server, the change getting a little bigger, making massive amounts of changes throughout an organization, and issues about centralization and decentralization. The practice is really our best practices section, where this is the real opinionated part where we said, email, okay, given, when our bosses let us run free, what would we do for an email system? Oh yeah, this is how we would do it. Oh yeah. And we do that for each of these different subjects. And then management is really the last third of the book. And I know management's a scary thing for technical people, but as a senior system administrator, you start dealing with more and more management issues. So this is where we talk about building the right organizational structure for your system and team, and how different structures affect the way you work and can make you more or less effective. Perception and visibility is sort of how users see you and how you can, some tools you could use to be seen in a better light. We have, well, the guide for technical managers is for you as the new technical manager, and the guide for non-technical managers, sort of the chapter that you tear out and you hand to your boss, or the first non-technical person above you in the org chart. And hiring and firing. Firing is one of my favorite chapters because it's really a security problem explored in a lot of detail. And we actually have a, yes? Oh, we actually have a 3-phase sort of technique for securely and ethically firing your system administrator. Yes?
Having now written the book and had a chance to go wild in setting things up, have you or Christine actually done what you said, if I didn't have a boss, I'd do this, and went, Jesus Christ, did I really say that?
Well, when I started writing this book, I was working for Bell Labs. And when I finished, I was working at Lumeta. And I was one of the original 7 employees. So we had to build an infrastructure from scratch. And I would pull out the draft copy of a chapter and say, well, this is how we should build the email system. And our boss would say, great, and since we don't have $10 billion, what would you like to? What will we actually be doing, Tom? Oh, we just slap it on the main server like everything else.
But have you or Christine discovered that what you wrote really isn't what you really would have done?
I don't think we've discovered anything that's like, liability suit bad. We've gone back and read some chapters and said, well, we should emphasize this more, or or gosh, we really left this out. One of the two negative reviews, well, okay, we haven't gotten any negative reviews, but two of the negative things that our great reviews have said. One said, gosh, there isn't a chapter on DNS. And they're like, oh yeah, that really should, we have a lot of opinions there, that should have been a best practices thing. And then another person said, well, this is a great system administration book, but oddly, they never tell you how to manage a web server. And I was like, oh my God, how could we forget that? Because in our mind, this book is about how to run a web server. Because to run a web server, you need to read the servers chapter. If you're running a colo facility, you need to read the data center chapter. Either way, you probably have to read the network chapter. And to deal with the customer service issues, you're going to need to have read the, if you have a formal help desk or the customer care chapter. So in our mind, this is all about web, building a web server, but we don't have a chapter called that. So the second edition is going to have a chapter. Okay, it'll probably be longer than this, but my idea is we'll have a chapter will be 1 page, and it'll say web servers. Read chapter 7 and 3, and you're done. No, we actually do have some things to say about web servers, but a lot of it is about change management. Once you start running a web server, you realize that the big issues become change management, security, and logging. And everything else is done by the graphic artists that you've hired, right? So,
Tom? Not firing, but normal termination. I mean, first you reverse provision the guy. Some people have been suggested you take an image of his whole hard disk or everything he's done. What do you think about that?
That's a good precaution. Any security policy you have always ends with, or it always gets, in the simple case we'll do this, if it's more difficult we'll do this, and if it's more difficult we'll do this, and the last case in that case statement is, and thank God we have backups, because that's your ultimate protection. So it would be a good insurance policy to take an image of the person's disk before you let them know that they've been laid off. But we actually go through a couple case studies, and it depends on the person. There's been one of the case studies, the person was told you have a month, you're fired, but you have a month before you're actually let go. And that was because they felt that this person was ethical and responsible and was going to do an orderly transition. Another case study, it was the manager of the system administrators that was fired under extreme circumstances and had to be locked out of every system literally while he was on an airplane back from Interop. And the neat thing, so quick summary of the chapter, you have to lock out their physical access to the building, their remote access to the network, and their application access once they're in the network. If you screw up any of those two things, if you screw up any of those one things, the other two cover for you. But then you have to deal with Trojan horses and that kind of thing. So timeline. It was a little more than 2 years to write this book, and 13 months was spent actually writing the book. The other 11 months was on editing and pitching the idea and revisions. That's something we really didn't expect. They shouldn't call it writing a book. They should call it editing and revising this thing that you spent a little bit of time writing. Let's see. So I'll talk more about CVS in a little bit, but one nice thing about CVS is we were able to keep a log of when chapters were completed and then generate a graph. So if you notice, so we sort of took the summer off here. We wrote -1 chapter in that. Yeah, we recalled the chapter.
Where's the divorce in that chart?
What?
Where's the divorce in that chart?
The divorce in this chart was here.
Oh.
The legal separation, it was very important from an intellectual property point of view that the book did not begin until after I moved out. Because then she would have half of the book, or a quarter of the book. And it was legal around here or something. Well, I don't want to talk about that. But hey, if you're getting a divorce, writing a book is a great way to keep your mind off the pain and suffering. So this is the mom page. This is the page so that someday my mom will see this presentation and will say, look, Mom, they liked it. And this one's the best. Despite sporting a title that sounds about as interesting as the longest checker games I ever saw, Thomas Limoncelli and Christine Hogan's book, The Practice of System and Network Administration, is an exceptionally valuable book. And two will be given away for free, so you know the value is at least 0 plus 0. So I mentioned that I don't know Christine Hogan, and it's really true. And how do you collaborate with someone you don't know? So first I'm going to prove that we didn't know each other. Proof by example. So I live in New Jersey, and I worked at the school I went to, Drew University, and Mentor Graphics and Bell Labs and Lumeta. And this did not overlap with Christine's work history. She grew up in London, was working in California when we met, and her work history takes her Ireland, Italy, Silicon Valley, and London. And literally the way we met was I was originally going to write this book with someone else, and he dropped off the project. And so I was at Unix's first intrusion detection symposium, maybe second. Anyway, the first one I went to, so it's the only one that matters. And I was at a coffee break bitching about the fact that my co-author dropped out, and I have a meeting with the publisher tomorrow, and here I'm in California, and what am I going to do? And the world needs this book. And this person with this beautiful British accent says, oh, I've been thinking about writing a book like that too. And I was like, oh, who are you? And are you serious? Or are you like, lunatic off the street? Because I have no way of telling. So during the next coffee break, I go around to all my friends and I'm like, do you know this person? Do you know this person? Turns out all of my California friends knew her and thought she was great and had worked with her and was indignant that I didn't already know her. I'm sorry, I don't know everybody. And it later turned out that some of the LISA conferences, often the only paper that I remembered was the one that she wrote, but she didn't present it, so I had never really seen her. She probably talked behind my back also and found out who I was. And we had this really good conversation about what should be in the book, and we saw eye to eye, so we got together. Now, and the other interesting thing was she was living in Silicon Valley, so I figured 3-hour time difference, I can deal with that. Right before we signed the contract with the publisher, she announced that she's moving to London to get a PhD. And so send my copy of the contract to this address at Imperial College. So it was sort of weird because this caught me off guard, and now I had to figure out what's the time difference to England, but -5. And, but anyway, so halfway through writing the book, she started dating someone in California, so she was flying over me back and forth, never stopping in New Jersey. And the weird thing about this is I had met this guy when I was in high school, and they're now engaged, so that's good. Anyway, so in-person meetings are going to be very expensive because she would have to stop in New Jersey on the way to. And at the time of publication, we had only physically met each other at 7 different meetings. We're in very different time zones. We had different cultural backgrounds. We had untested personality compatibility. If you think loading Linux on a modern Dell laptop is difficult, imagine embarking on a 2-year project with someone who, you don't know, it could be a total mismatch. And we had very differing bandwidth. I was at Bell Labs, we had a big honkin' T3 that I ran. She had a 56K baud modem when she would build by the minute when you're in the UK, or when her boyfriend was spending this telecommuting to work for the summer. He worked for Cisco, so he would, bring bandwidth with him. I come from Cisco, I bring bandwidth. So how do we meet these challenges? Well, when all else fails, follow the advice you give to other people. Maybe it'll work. And that's what we did. So we actually followed the advice in the book relating to other people and dealing with team building issues. Sadly, the book hadn't been written yet, so we had this time travel paradox. But that's really what we did. And the cornerstone of the book is these 6 principles that you need to do the basics first. We talked about basics before. The issues of simplicity, clarity, generality, which are stolen from the Kernighan and Pike book, the Practice of Programming. Gee, similar title. And communication, which is the human communication, and automation. So everything you do as a system admin, think about these six things. Basics first. So the basics are about setting the ground rules, writing the security policy before you go to configure the firewall, writing the security policy before you decide if you need a firewall. So we had to have some long conversations where we hashed out what are the tools we're going to use. What was our formatting standard? Thank God we both are LaTeX fans. Terminology issues. How are we going to refer to the people that a sysadmin serves? Are they users or are they customers? And we can refer to them as customers, and there's actually a section of the book that explains why, because we think it puts you into the right state of mind when you think about the relationship. How are we going to do the project management? We're going to be schedule driven, and we had to come up with a development cycle. Now, if you've ever been a system administrator at a software house, you learn that there's this like clockwork kind of development cycle that, say, the company releases new versions of the software every quarter, which means the last month of any quarter, no changes on the network because everything has to be stable. The first month of a quarter, you can make lots of changes because the architects are doing their planning, and it's mostly whiteboard work, so that's when the sysadmins can do their big revamping kind of things. And you have this clockwork schedule. Oh, and everything gets delayed if, no network changes if the software release is late. These kind of things. Two companies ago, the previous company, when I was at Bell Labs, the weeks between when the books closed and when things had to be filed with the IRS was called network quiet time. And there was, unless the room was on fire, you could not configure a router because it was network quiet time. And it makes sense. You all know planning ahead is a good thing, development cycle. So we came up with this development cycle for each chapter, or each group of 4 chapters. We were going to try to write 4 chapters a month. I would write 2, she would write 2. So the first couple days of any month, we had a phone call, usually lasted about 4 hours, where we would discuss the next 4 chapters. We had already come up with this big global outline, and we had sort of brainstormed on the points we need to hit, but in this phone call we would really firm up the outline for that chapter. And then, so we had this cute terminology. We had the primary author and the secondary author for each chapter. So I wrote the backups chapter, so I'm the primary author and she's the secondary author. So I would write the chapter and send an email notification of primary author handoff, chapter 17 or whatever that is. And at primary author handoff, the secondary author then revises the chapter, adds, deletes, edits, whatever, and declares secondary author handoff. The primary author then does their revisions and does diffs to see what the secondary author changed. And at that point, they can either forward the chapter to the publisher or loop, send the chapter back to the secondary author. So each month, we were going through this process simultaneously on 4 chapters. And this actually worked really well. It was actually a little bit different when we started. One of the pieces of advice we give in the book is, after you come up with a policy, run through it once and then do some revisions. So this is the final process we came up with. And we're real process geeks, so this was great for us, sending this official notifications. Simplicity. Keep things as simple as possible. We kept everything as simple ASCII files. It's easiest to manage. You can diff things if you keep everything in ASCII. Another part of the simplicity was we had one CVS repository for everything. Let's see. We can talk more about CVS later. But this repository had our schedule, our to-do lists, our outline. When we'd get reviews, chapters would be submitted to the publisher and we'd get comments back from, they'd farm it out to people in the industry, and we'd get these reviews. We'd check that into the repository, and as we sort of had an ASCII check mark as we addressed each concern that the reviewer had. So everything's in one repository. And also part of the simplicity is that we left the fancy formatting to the publisher. We were latex geeks, but rather than doing the more fancy stuff, we just put in square brackets, note to formatter, put this in a square box or whatever. Sort of the importance of delegation. I know all the big LaTeX fans in the room are like, well, putting a box around it, it's easy. You just, no, it's, we wanted to focus on writing. Clarity. Clarity is about processes that are clearer and understandable, so there's less confusion. So we had, anytime we had to come up with a process, it was the minimal process that meets all the requirements. Using the right tool at the right time. Clarity to us is also about using open protocols. You can gain a huge amount of simplicity by defining what protocol the server is going to accept and let users pick their own client. I'll talk more about that. And the right level of security. So communication. We had, these are our three basic communication tools. We had in-person meetings, phone, and email. In-person, very expensive, but great for high interaction kind of stuff. So we used that when we were brainstorming. Phone calls, we tried to keep phone calls to problem-solving, brainstorming, and status meetings. And email we used for logistics and notifications. If you notice, we didn't use email as a file transfer mechanism. That's what the file repository was for. If we needed to send each other a file, we'd put it in the repository and just email the URL, or really the path name. So did we really have 7 meetings? This is our documented proof that we actually only have met 7 times. And the last one was to celebrate the completion of the book. So really 6 times in the process of writing the book. And the next time we're going to see each other will be in November at the Unix Lisa conference. And we're teaching 2 tutorials together. We're also giving this presentation as an invited talk. Now, she's given this presentation a couple times. I've given it a couple times, but we've never given it together. So I don't know. We're not sure how we're going to do this. I was thinking, I'll do the odd pages. She'll do the even pages. Or, it's just I just want someone in the audience to count how many times someone says something and then the other one of us says, "That's not what I say for this slide." Okay. So repository is a communication tool. So these are all the different things we had in our repository, all as ASCII files. One of the most important was the hot issues to-do list. It literally listed every single chapter in the groupings, in the order we were going to write them, and stood out various hot issues that needed to be taken care of. At the top of the file were urgent issues, and everything else was sort of buried within the monthly schedule. And then I think we put a capital X at the beginning of any line that was completed, sort of to cross it off. And so you could easily grep the lines without the capital X and see what needs to be done. We also archived any chapter that we submitted to the publisher. We were submitting them in PostScript so we could just check them into the repository. And this became very important because we'd get reviews back that were just simply, page 37, line 6, remove the letter A. Well, we've written 10 chapters then, and they were all before that. So that's, you know, anyway, you can see the problems that that would cause. Back to the 7 principles, 6 principles. Generality. This is a quickie. One repository, generality is a single solution that solves many problems. And if you've read the Kernighan and Pike book on programming, they do some amazing things with generality. They'll start an algorithm and make it more general, and in the process it gets faster because they've also cleaned up the code along the way. So a lot of people think that generality can bog you down. We think that generality can actually solve problems. Another example of generality is the single format for every chapter. That saved us a whole lot of head scratching and also sort of focused us because we could focus our conversations when we were brainstorming. We'd come up with an issue that really needs to be in this chapter, and then we'd debate, well, is that a basic or an icing? And that itself was very useful. And I think one of the utilitarian parts of the book is you can, when a coworker says, oh, you know, we really, you know, this new print system really needs such and such, and you can turn to the book and say, well, they classified that as an icing issue. You should, let's get it working before we fine tune it. And automation. I guess this is the part where I have to finally explain CBS. How many people here are familiar with CBS or just heard the term? Oh, this is great. CBS is a source code control system. So imagine a server somewhere out on the internet that has all these different files, and usually it's for a large programming project, and these would be all, you know, C or C++ files and data files like that. Each person in the project has the ability to check out a file from the repository, make changes, and then check it back in. And the repository keeps all past revisions. You know, it's just storing the diffs, so it's very efficient, but the benefit of this is you can go back and say, what did this file look like on January 3rd? And it can pull that out of the repository. Or diff the January 3rd edition and the you know, 3 releases ago, these kind of things. Now, there's a number of packages like CVS. There's RCS and SCCS and ClearCase. One of the nice things about CVS is it's concurrent. The C stands for concurrent. Two people can check stuff out at the same time. So, example, I could check out a chapter, make changes. She could check out the same chapter, be making changes. Let's suppose I check my changes in first. The repository accepts those changes. When she goes to check in her changes, it says, now wait, someone's already checked in some changes. So it carefully merges her changes into the repository. So, for example, if I only made changes to the beginning of the chapter and she only made changes to the end, it'll just automatically merge those in. But if we both try to change the same exact part of the file, it'll actually pull her into a browser and say, sort of show her both changes and require her to do a manual merge. So it's the greatest thing in the world for large projects. And there are projects with hundreds, probably thousands of programmers. Actually, I was going to say Linux, but they're now using BitKeeper. So there are projects like FreeBSD, which has hundreds of programmers, and everyone's simultaneously able to make changes and check them in a controlled fashion. We told our editor, or our publisher about this, and she was blown away. She had no idea that this existed, and said that many of the books that are written by 2 authors, well, the authors have later commented that something like 30 or 40% of their time was spent managing the confusion over who's edited what chapter when, and making changes and emailing it to the co-author and getting it back and not being sure how to merge stuff in. We had none of those problems. It was all automated for us. Yes?
Do you happen to know if the authors that your publisher was talking about were technically savvy authors?
I assume that she meant her non-tech savvy customers, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Because, for example, I know Bill Cheswick's book is under CVS because when I was his sysadmin at Bell Labs, I knew what machine it was on. People say, there was this fluke. They accidentally, Amazon announced that their second edition was soon to be out, and they were taking pre-orders, and it was like the #1 book that day. They were like 3 years from being ready. And people were like, damn, I had my hopes up. I thought I was going to get to buy the second edition. I said, oh, I have access to the second edition. I guess I shouldn't have said that. But a lot of the tables are calculated with Perl. The backup chapter has these big tables of numbers estimating changes, percent of change to a file system and how that affects how many tapes you would need to get to do incremental backups. And those are completely generated by Perl scripts that there's essentially an include file that just sucks them into the LaTeX code. And that was really a lifesaver because I'm the laziest person in the world. And this way, I know that the numbers are correct because someone else did the calculations for me. And at the end, we realized that there was a mistake in them. And I was able to fix the bug in the Perl script and type make, and it just regenerated the tables. The bug was pretty small. It was that the bottom line showed percent change, and it was 0-based instead of 100-based. And the paragraph describing the table was the other way around. So changed the formula, everything worked. So who here is familiar with Make? Good. Make is the ultimate publishing tool, and I hear programmers use it now too. Because I also have not the greatest memory. So anytime I typed a command, I would, if the command worked, or once I debugged the command to the point that it worked, I would copy that into the make file. So for example, you can type make, and it does all the LaTeX processing to format the book. You can type make remake, and it wipes everything and does a full rebuild. You can type make CD-ROM, and it does the full LaTeX build, generates the PDFs and the PS files, and generates the .iso image that is what we would burn to a CD-ROM and send to our publisher. Now, what's the value in capturing that command? Well, how many times am I really going to have to burn this CD-ROM? Well, it turned out it took about 2 hours to get the right combination of options to the make ISOFS command, because that command has 10 billion options. And we actually did end up, I figured, well, I'll reuse this command when we get to the second edition. Actually, we did have to rebuild the image, so it was very useful. Though, here's a tip. Don't try checking his ISO image into a CVS repository. Because it says, oh, that's a binary. I'm going into binary mode. And some loser who wrote that code decided to suck the whole thing into memory and then save it in the repository. So you know, gee, we're getting out of virtual memory error. I wonder if that's happening on the client or the server.
Did you rewrite the CVS code?
Oh yeah, that's what I wanted to spend my weekends doing. No, we just don't check those files. But it also means we can't use CVS for these PowerPoint presentations, which we sort of fake it though. But I won't go into that. So CVS, if you look at it, it really does have the facility to sort of add plugins that would handle special files. So I'm sure one of you is doing like your PhD on a diffing program for binaries. You should make it as a plugin for CVS, and you'd make my life easier. And I'd make sure you won the raffle. Hey, let's do the raffle now. Wait, am I at a good... Yeah, this is a good stopping point for the raffle. We have all the...
Everybody, does anybody here not have a ticket?
When you describe it to your publisher as a system that manages these changes, and oh, it's accessible globally. So when I was on vacation in New Mexico, I was able to do stuff, and Chris was global, traveling the globe, and she was able to do stuff. This was just the most amazing thing to. It's funny, actually. One of the most shocking things about writing a book is learning how low tech the book publishing industry is. O'Reilly is the one book company that knows how to spell computer. And Addison Wesley is definitely number 2 if you want a high-tech publisher. Addison University was high-tech enough to say, LaTeX, yes, we have a consulting company that will do the formatting for us in LaTeX. And
It's called O'Reilly.
no, it's called ICC. But other companies, actually there's a, I won't say his name, but there's one author I know who his text was accepted, was probably retyped in from what he can tell. He then went through all, uploaded to their big mainframe that drives these, 100-year-old, movable type, things. And he had to submit all of his editorial changes with red pen on paper. When he went to do the second edition, he said, well, give me the text back so I can edit it. They said, oh, you wouldn't be able to read our mainframe files. He said, well, how am I going to do the second edition? They said, well, just, submit the changes like you were before, red circles, and if you have a new chapter to add, give us the new chapter. And he said, I'm not doing a new chapter. I'm not doing a second edition. He can't do a second edition because his text is in some mainframe someplace. So that's the publishing horror story. So our contract actually explicitly says that we will get back an electronic copy that is editable, and so this thrilled my lawyer because he had never seen these terms. Acceptable formats include LaTeX, blah 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 blah. Unacceptable formats include
Word.
PDF. Actually, we would have settled for Word because at least it's better than PDF.
Yeah.
Or other formats that are mutually agreed to. So that's an issue. But
Did the
yes.
publisher get access to your CBS repository in any form?
We would have offered it if our publisher was that technical. But your editor is more like book editors today are more like recruiters for sports teams. They go to conferences, they try to find book ideas, and then they manage the project. The editing itself was done by a professional proofreader. The formatting's done by a formatting house. So
I was just thinking, it would be a perfect thing to take this naive customer
mhm.
and show them how to do this new thing.
Yeah, I think the authors that she works with are technical enough. One thing we did do is instead of emailing the chapters to her, we would put them up on a website and we gave her a password. I'll talk about that in a second. Actually, I'll talk about that at the end of this slide. So I've talked forever about CBS, but the CBS server was on a Solaris box, globally accessible through the internet, which is nothing to us, but to the non-technical audience, it's like, wow, that's amazing. We access it through SSH, the only way to communicate nowadays. And the first bulk of the book was written on Linux with some Solaris. It depends on, technically I wasn't writing the book at work, but there was the occasional checkout to a Solaris machine at work where I'd work on it. And Windows. But one of the powerful things about open protocols is if you are unhappy with your vendor, you can change. And so we could have moved the Solaris CDS repository to another machine if we had to. We did move the clients. There was a period where Christine did not have any Linux-ness at home, and she needed to be able to write from home. So we had the CVS client for Windows is quite exceptional, and so that was she was able to switch to a Windows client midway through. Now think about that, doing that for many applications. Oh, halfway through the project, we're going to change operating systems. That would kill some projects, but you can do that if you stick with open protocols. And I also switched to Windows for a part because I couldn't get power management working on Linux. And for me to write, if I have to begin my day writing or nothing gets done, because once I'm on a network-based computer, I have so many distractions that I cannot write. So I literally had to wake up and be able to open my laptop and have it it has to have been in sleep mode. So when it comes up, there's VI and I'm just editing. Because in the time it would take to boot, I would get a distraction and boom, I'm not writing. So I couldn't get power management working on Linux, so I got VI for Windows and CVS client for Windows, and so a lot of the book I wrote early in the morning in Windows. So in some ways, I feel guilty that this somewhat Unix-centric book was not all written on Unix. On the other hand, I think this demonstrates the power of open protocols and open source. So, LaTeX, talk about LaTeX, talk about Apache, that we gave documents to non-technical people, people that couldn't access our repository. We put them up on a web server. We hate faxes, so the faxing there were some situations where we just had images that had to be sent around, and we would scan them and put them in the repository, then email a notification. And of course, IETF open standards for email. This is less of an issue now, but when we started writing on the book, there were still many corporations that were not using SMTP for email. And in fact, depending on if you consider Exchange to be SMTP or not, there are many companies that are still not doing that. Was there a hand up? Yes.
Maybe my age here, but when they did the last of the 4.4 BSD manuals, they actually wrote a paper about how hard indexing was. How good is Make Index?
Make Index is okay. Addison Wesley actually hired a professional indexer to read the book and make an index, which we tried to cross-check. I think it's a good index. I wouldn't say it's a fantastic index. It's really hard for a third party to index. We kept doing, with an 800-page book, basically you have to do pop quizzes. Well, what's a topic? And then you look it up in the index and make sure that they got that right. But I know yesterday I wanted to look up the Lucky Bucks anecdote, and I couldn't find it in the index. So, oh, actually, I haven't mentioned the anecdotes yet. This is something we have to add to the presentation. So another really, something I'm very proud about in this book is that instead of saying, is that it's filled with really cool stories. I learned Unix from a mentor. I didn't learn it from a book. I learned it from a mentor who told the story of Unix and how these commands follow these commands, and there's history. And I think a lot of us learn system administration not out of a book, but through a good mentor who tells you these stories and anecdotes. And I have friends that are anthropologists, and they say that the way that a society passes knowledge from generation to generation is through the stories that they tell. And so it was very important to us to have this be a storybook. So there's all these little gray boxes where we tell stories, and these are real anecdotes that happened. We did not have, every single one of them was verified to be true. So we make a point, and then we tell an anecdote that proves the point. And that makes the book interesting. One of our reviewers said that he promised himself he would just read to the end of the chapter, but then all of a sudden he realized it was 3 a.m. and he had read 4 more chapters, and gosh, I would never say that about a Java book. And that was the review that made it all worthwhile, because that was the point of the book. We wanted this to capture all those great anecdotes that helped us learn, that we got from mentors. So, people here are, I assume, familiar with SSH. One of the nice things about SSH that a lot of people don't know about is you can set up cryptographic key pairs that let one machine talk to another without having to enter a password. So, and also key pairs that are only allowed to execute certain commands on the other side. So I have a special key that I install on any machine that should be able to check in documents to the repository as me. And I have a different key that just gives read-only access to the repository. These kind of things really helped us in the book, because I don't trust many computers. So there were certain places where I just was doing proofreading and I would just need read-only access. Let's see. And I've already covered all of that. I've talked about the benefits of open protocols being the ability to change clients. The other thing that I learned during writing this book was SysWin. SysWin gives you all the Unix commands on a Windows environment. And it's fantastic. I mean, the first time I piped the output of one thing to another, on a Windows box. And then I catted a file and piped it to SSH and ran the command that was going to process it on another machine. And I said, oh my God, I'm doing this on a Windows box. This is great. And then I was upgrading from one machine to another, and I needed to copy a lot of data, and I did a tar on one Windows box and SSH'd. I said send the output to standard output and piped this to SSH to a different Windows box. And on that Windows box, I untarred. And now I was really in heaven. It can be slow, but it's getting faster every revision. But boy, if you're not using SysWin and you're using Windows, you're working too hard. And it's, yes, it's one of the best X Windows implementation.
Yep.
And it's great. It just works. You take a bit of source code from a Linux or Solaris box and type make, and it compiles. It's hallelujah.
Is it free?
And it's free. Yes, you go to syswin.com, and it even has a good installer program. So why didn't Tom use this SysWin about 2 years early? Well, because I'm lazy, and I figure, oh, I hate installing things. It's always such a pain in the ass and building the source and everything. And then I finally said, well, I really need to use this, so I installed it. Oh, they have this great installer, and it FTP stuff, and it's pre-compiled. Should have done it years ago.
It wasn't always that good, though.
It wasn't always that good. I guess that I must have started using SysWin the day after their cool new install system was released, because to me, I've been using it forever, but people on the cutting edge like yourself are like, oh, you should have seen it when it was new. And while this book is agnostic about technology and what operating system is the best, because we all know the best operating system is whatever is right for that given application. Our server always stayed on Unix because we're Unix hogs.
There's something called Telmeet instead of the OpenSSH. It's a DOS-based SSH client, and people that have minimals, or they just needed to get in the server. I just installed Telmeet. It's a Russian-made
T-E-L-N-E?
You just FTP.
And how is that spelled?
T-E-L-N-E-A-T. Telmeet.
Oh, okay. Great.
It's just an SSH client, but it doesn't give you SCP ability. There were people that needed both. I basically give them WinSCP or SCP Explorer, and that would give them the SCP side.
WinSCP is good. PuTTY is good. PuTTY got a lot better recently.
Yeah.
I tried both PuTTY and Telmeet, and I stayed with Telmeet.
Yeah. And actually, what's the other thing? Was there a question?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there's some good, when we were writing this, there weren't any good SSH version 2 implementations for Windows. So when the security holes were announced about version 1, we basically had no alternative other than SysWin OpenSSH. So some of the non-software. Secure CRT, yes. That's actually what I use most of the time is Secure CRT. Why didn't I think of that?
It's not secure on the machine itself.
It's as secure as that machine. I wouldn't run the daemon. And when I copied files from one machine to another, I was only running the daemon for as long as I was doing that copy. Yeah. Though a nice thing about SysWin is you can cat etc password, and it sort of generates it out of the Windows registry and stuff. I mean, these guys are nuts. And they hacked CD, so if you CD to a : it does the right thing. Anyway, non-software tools. So the whole beginning of this presentation was about how system administration is about all those soft skills, negotiation and stuff. And this is where we talk about it. And this is the part of the presentation where the heroine discusses the soft tools. So delegation. We really want to focus on the writing and find people that were better than us do the other things. So editing, proofreading, data entry was done by other people. Data entry included paying a friend, I think $10 an hour to take the reviews that we would get back, and she had CVS access, and she would, if it was an obvious correction, she would make it. If it was a non-obvious correction, she would add a LaTeX comment with, reviewer so-and-so says, this paragraph sucks, or you should rearrange these sentences. And she would put 3 capital X's at the beginning of any of these issues. So we could grep for XXX and find all the work that we had to do. So we knew the book was done when we could grep for XXX and we'd not find a single thing in any of our tech files. We had professional editing done by the proofreader. The picture drawing was by this outsourcing company called ICC. Literally, drafts of this book had diagrams that were actually drawn on a napkin and checked into the repository.
You should use RT for that.
I thought about that. I really almost created an RT queue for book-related issues. And RT, for those of you who are unfamiliar, is the request tracking software made by Jesse Vincent. It is it's the best way to manage your users. Tell them to send mail to help, and it goes in this. It's assigned a ticket number. Never loses an issue. Chapter 27 also talks about, yes?
Is that at all like Jitterbug?
What?
Is that at all like Jitterbug?
Is that like gnats?
Like RT, is that like
Yes.
Jitterbug?
Yes, I think it is. Is Jitterbug a bug tracking system?
It's bug tracking, but it's email based.
Yes, it's similar. However, the nice thing about the difference between tracking bugs and tracking user requests is that bugs are something that gets filed once or twice a day. They're usually fairly well considered, and there's minimal interaction because of that. User requests have to be much more dynamic in the communication flow. So RT is really tuned to being more of a communication tool for communicating with customers rather than something like Remedy, which is a commercial bug tracking and user request tracking system whose focus seems to be on generating the statistics that management wants and screw quality communication with the customers. But the really great thing about Remedy is it's really expensive, but it's so slow. The other thing about Remedy is it justifies hiring a full-time programmer just to maintain it because it's a toolkit, which means it doesn't do anything.
Installed RT at home. I've never had to touch it since installing it. They say
Yeah.
it says a to-do list on the audit trail.
Yeah.
Really nice for that.
A friend of mine has a little public access. Okay. So one of the things I do as a hobby is I run a co-location facility as a collective. We have a friend with a basement and a couple racks and a little bandwidth, and we have a bunch of servers, and it's run as an autonomous collective. Because we have no king. Anyway, one of the people in the collective now runs RT, and if any of the users on his little FreeBSD box have an issue, he just says, "Oh, send mail to help. I'll take care of it." And it's like, wait, but this is an amateur thing, and you're running this, professional request tracking system. He says, "It saves me time." It's great. And the programmer for RT, Jesse Vincent. I remember his email address better than his actual name. If it doesn't have a feature that you want, he can be hired. So it's open source the way I think open source should be. I have a very capitalistic view of open source. Gee, I really wish I had this feature. Who can I pay to add that feature? And he lives nearby. Yeah, he's in this town. There's a couple universities that are basically, giving him enough money to pay rent because he's, you want that feature? Okay. My landlord needs $500 by Thursday. What color would you like it? So chapter 27 talks a lot about communications. I'm going to give you nutshell summary. There's 4 kinds of communication problems in the world. There's my problems, there's your problems, there's our problems, and then there's other people's problems. And each of these different communication situations has a different skill set that you need to develop to do that effectively. And we go through a number of the skills. I've listed some here. If it's my problem, I have to use what social workers call I statements, which is a way of effectively communicating my problem to you, which is combined. You say, I feel emotion when you do whatever. So I feel frustrated when you make engineering decisions without consulting the system administration team. That is an effective way of communicating to your boss. It's much more effective than saying, you bastard! Because your boss isn't going to understand the problem. When someone comes to you with a problem, you're dealing with one of those your problems. You have a problem, and I have to first figure out what the hell you're talking about, because you're not smart enough to use an I statement. And then make sure I've really understood you, and then brainstorm and help you solve that. So you have techniques like mirroring, reflection, and summary statements. And in the tutorial we're teaching at Lisa, we actually go through some of these. Reflection is a technique for dealing with a very angry person. So if someone comes to you and is very emotional, I can't believe the network's down when this project's due and blah, 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 blah. The first thing a technical person always tries to do is deal with the technical side. Oh, well, the network will be up soon and it's actually been very reliable lately, but a person that's emotional doesn't want to hear that. A person that is in an emotional state cannot deal with the problem until you've dealt with their emotions. So reflection is a tool for doing that, and it's so simple. You say, gosh, you're really, and name the emotion that you're seeing. So the book gives you more tips. Don't try this at home until you've read the chapter. But basically, when that person comes screaming, you say, wow, you're really upset about this. And it disarms the person. First it says, I'm being listened to. Oh, I was pissed running down this hallway and I was getting all charged up. I'm going to give this person a piece of my mind. And you've communicated to that person, oh, they got the point. The point is that I'm pissed off. And it also humbles them a little. Oh, I'm showing much more anger than I had intended. I know this because he said, gosh, you're really upset about this. Which was not the reaction I was expecting. And so now this calms the person down. And then they, yes, I'm upset. And then they calm down. Oh, okay, goal accomplished. He knows I'm upset. And then you can say, we're working on it. The network is, we have our top people working on bringing the network up. And the person can rationally deal with this. So that's something you'll never find in a man page. Our problems are sort of a combination. When you and I have a problem and we have to go to our boss and explain it, first we have to use those I statements and negotiation to make sure that we understand, we're on the same page, and then we can go to the boss and use our problem skills and make sure that they're communicated to the boss right. Other people's problems and non-problems are, well, the first skill is to figure out that, oh, this is a non-problem, and the second skill is restraint. If someone else has a problem, you have to not do anything. If they've brought it to you and said, I need you to help fix it, well, now it becomes your problem. But until that happens, you need to back off. I know a number of people who spend half of their day being very concerned with other people's problems. They really should use some restraint and get back to work. Now, unless that person comes to them and says, I want you to fix this.
I thought by restraint you meant...
You mean not laugh? Oh, I thought you meant you need to tie the person up. That's a different workshop that I teach. And in that workshop, we also talk about negotiation.
Is there a hands on left?
I get arrested. Is there a hands-on lab? No, but I do some demos. So it's amazing how much negotiation you have to do when you're writing a book, especially with someone else. Now the book does have, we claim it's the first sysadmin book that has a section on salary negotiation. And I have to just brag for 1 second. One of our reviewers, the reviewers sign non-disclosures and they're not supposed to, you know, share the book until it's printed, but this one reviewer in California showed the salary negotiation section to a friend who had just gotten her master's in social work and was offered, I think, well, I don't know the exact amount, but was given an offer for her first job out of social work school. And she used the technique in the salary negotiation class, and I'm told that the next time we go to California, this person will be buying me dinner because she is being paid the highest starting salary that this organization has ever paid. So we're very proud of this. But negotiation is something you have to constantly do when you're working with someone else. So Christine and I had to negotiate with each other on many different issues. What font are we going to use? What are the headings going to look like? But also we had to negotiate.
You're leaving that part to the publisher.
What?
You're leaving the formatting to the publisher.
We did, but they gave us, 5 samples and said, which format would you like? So we had to sign a contract with the publisher, and so that involved lawyers. I had to sign a contract with my employer. I changed employers while writing this, and Bell Labs has a very liberal book writing policy. Their employees write a book. The Bell Labs gets the copyright, but the employee gets all the royalties. But you have to sign a "we're starting the process" contract. When I changed employers, I had to write a contract that dissolved the contract with Bell Labs, and Bell Labs transferred the rights to my new employer, and I had a contract with the new employer because they had a similar. Actually, when I joined, they asked me to sign an intellectual property agreement, which I had many revisions because it had to be at least as liberal as the Bell Labs contract. Now, luckily, this new company was receiving funding from Bell Labs, and about half of us were ex-Bell Labs employees, so there was, this was not, so this was a happy negotiation, but it was interesting. Yes?
Were you writing the book on company time? Is that why you had to do all that, or?
No. Some people in Bell Labs, if you are a PI, a principal investigator, so if you're a high-ranking researcher, you can write a book on company time. You'll then,
If you read most of the agreements, the IP agreements you have to sign with companies when you start, I did one about 2 weeks ago. It basically says, we own everything you think.
Right.
yeah.
And what you have to do is you have to pre-negotiate and say, okay, strike out any work I do on non-company related free software projects. For instance, I put a couple in and said, this work that I do, I will not do on company time, it doesn't belong to you, and you agree to that. And so all that had to be done.
Yeah.
Big priority, I'm assuming.
Exactly. And Lumeta has this process where I submit what I'd like to publish externally. They give me a receipt. 10 days later, they have to release it, say that I can release it, or tell me what parts are too proprietary to release. And if they don't respond in 10 days, the default is that I get to publish. So the next book that I want to write is going to be like pornographic, so that I can say, well, I'd give you a copy, but that would violate our sexual harassment policy. You could come to my house and I'll show it to you. What?
You just put in one photo like that.
Right. Let's see, other negotiation stuff. Oh, so we talked about negotiation, the salary aspects and also non-salary issues, vendor negotiation, and general negotiation tips. For example, buying a car, and the fact that if you have a lot of issues to negotiate on, it's best to do the no-brainers first, and then work up to the more contentious issues. And if one of the things you thought was a no-brainer turns into a contentious issue, just stop and say, okay, let's move on and get back to that later. Psychologically, that builds trust by doing the things you agree on first, and then you build up to more contentious issues. Namespaces. So we're big namespace geeks. A well-planned namespace saves you a huge amount of time in the future. I'm very pissy about how our auto-mount maps are structured, because to me this is, if you screw that up, all your future projects are going to be convoluted, or at least the data storage portion. I don't know how the rest of your projects will be. And we feel it's very important to decouple the service from the host name. So for example, our CVS server was on cvs.plets.org, which is actually an alias pointing to the real host. This became very important when our initial server was on the Rhythms DSL service, which, and when they went out of business, they gave their customers 24-hour notice that everyone was going to lose their network connection. Well, we turned off CVS, we copied the data to Chris's server, which oddly enough was in California, re-enabled CVS. Well, we changed DNS to point cvs.plus.org to the new IP address, re-enabled CVS, and our users, the proofreader, data entry people, and ourselves had no changes that we had to make on our clients. This is sort of a natural thing to do for probably most people in the room who grew up with the internet and DNS and stuff, but you find in business, this is just the most amazing thing in the world. Wow, the machine that all 100,000 employees access to update their vacation time with the payroll people shouldn't be called Oregon Payroll 02. No, you want it to be called payroll.company.com so that you can change what server it's on. I'm sorry, it was North Point that went bankrupt. Did I say Rhythms earlier? Yes, yeah. It was North Point. Rhythms also went bankrupt. Everyone's going bankrupt. Actually, we moved it to a server that's at her ex-employer, who was permitting her to keep a server there. And they didn't go bankrupt, but they shut down their big expensive data center to their little tiny data center, and so we had to change the IP address just recently.
Domain names being like $9 a year now, isn't that like most no-brainer for most sysadmins? Because you can get a domain name for $9 a year and park it onto a service and change
Sure.
DNS for another service in a year.
Right, absolutely. But imagine a large corporation like Lucent.com. It's not a no-brainer at big companies. Also, it's not a big. It is a big. Is that a big brainer for certain software packages? There are a huge number of multi-million-dollar software packages that have to be accessed with the actual host name and can't go through an alias. And there are licensed daemons out there that bind to IP addresses, or
MAC addresses,
or MAC addresses, or my company stuff binds to a MAC address, but it's an appliance. You'll never change MAC addresses, we swear. We would ship you a new Ethernet card with the new license. Actually, person would walk over and personally install it for you. What am I thinking? We made BudTool crash at Bell Labs because our host names are the fully qualified domain name, and one of our machines, that name was longer than 32 bytes, and BudTool cannot work on a machine whose host name is larger than 31 bytes. 1 byte for the 0. And they're like, oh gosh, what's this machine called? Tristodecaphobia? And we're like, no, it's called STU, S-T-U. Well, that's less than 32 bytes, 31. Yes, but it's stu.research.bell-labs.com. You can name hosts like that? Okay.
A few years ago, DHES insisted on sending all of its mail to mail, unqualified, in the domain. I found this out when I started the second PDTS service inside BBN. And they started getting my mail. And then I called up the company and said, you've got to fix this. And they said, oh, we'll fix that in 9 months when we put out our next release.
Did you consider binary editing the binaries? To change the string? Oh, okay. That is the solution.
I didn't say that was right. Stop. That's the DDI implementation that sends mail to nail. Okay, so security. Security. When people talk about security, everyone immediately thinks of firewalls and crypto algorithms and now IDS solutions. Security is not about any of that stuff. I swear. Security is 90% policy and 10% technology. And actually, our whole security chapter does not mean... It's all about policy and selling security policy to management and to customers and what you need in a policy and how your security organization needs to grow as your company grows and things around that. So much so that someone pointed out that it doesn't mention the word firewall. So about a day before we shipped this to the publisher, we're like, quick, find a paragraph where we can mention firewalls. But really, security is about fundamentally asking the question, what are we trying to protect and how much are we willing to spend to protect that? So there are certain things that we needed to protect the access to and the integrity of. The book itself, other data in the repository. So access control was important. We didn't mind if someone got an advanced copy of the book. We just didn't want them to be able to change the contents. Because eventually everyone was going to see what's in the book. Now sure, there were people that were coming out with competing books. We were sort of racing with Mark Burgess, but once we saw his table of contents, we realized that these are very complementary books. So we wouldn't have cared if he had seen an early edition, except it would be embarrassing to see all the typos. So access and integrity were important there. There was low-risk access, so the drafts of the chapters that we sent to the publisher were PDFs, and we needed these to be easy to get to. And again, we didn't care if someone saw an advanced copy, because as soon as, why lock these down? Because we're giving them to our publisher, who immediately forwards it to 5 people in the industry for comments. So this was clear text passwords on an HTTP server. Why not? The right tool at the right time. We wanted confidentiality and integrity for our editing sessions, and we decided that our personal communication was not going to be an issue. Our phone calls were going to be over an international line, so we knew that they were going to be listened to potentially. Our email was going to be status notifications. So we weren't going to PGP encrypt them, because what's the harm in someone finding out that primary author signs off on chapter 2? You know.
I took the secret element, though.
As long as you don't encrypt it, nobody will look.
Yes, there are many people who encrypt all email just to give the NSA more work to do. So the protections we used, as I mentioned, SSH with host keys. I'm sorry. Actually, that's not per host key. It's really per user key. Clear text passwords and no protection for email and phone. And the ultimate backup, the ultimate security feature is reliable backups. If you have good backups, you can recover from a disaster. So it's more of an insurance policy than a security policy. But, I'd like to end with some advice for future authors. Expect 2 years with no social life. So every book always begins with, I'd like to thank my wife and family, or husband and family, for putting up with the blah, 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 while I wrote this book. And I always saw those and said, oh, that's very sweet, but how bad could it be? Oh my God. Think about it. You're working 40 or 50 hours a week, and you have to write this book, which is, I have a very active life. So when am I going to find 40 additional hours in a week? I mean, I basically realized at one point that I have one free night a week. So if I procrastinated that one night, that was the whole week. That was a quarter of the month.
Hey, you waste that much time with your eyes closed every week.
Absolutely. So actually I developed a system where I would RSVP to things with this conditional. I'd say, you can check the schedule on the web page. I'm RSVPing yes, but if I don't show up, that means I'm not, on schedule. So the people I was dating were told, yes, we can go out Saturday night unless I'm not on schedule. So that gave them the impetus to encourage me to stay on schedule. Don't do it for the money. No one makes money writing a book except the publisher. You have to write a book because you love the subject and you have things that you want to tell other people about. Consultants, though, you can increase your saleability as a consultant if you have a book under your in your past. As I said, the 13-chapter rule. It's important to have a co-author that complements you. First of all, my personality type, I needed a co-author. This book would have never happened if I didn't have someone to race against. I've turned in my first chapter this month. Have you? We also had very different experience. She had more of a dot-com-y kind of experience. She built a lot of the infrastructure that you see at eBay and Web TV and a number of places like that. I have more of a corporate background and academic background. So that synthesis really improved the book. And then you also need to take time to compliment your co-author. You say nice things. It's a relationship. This is like dating. If you don't give flowers and chocolate every once in a while, things are going to deteriorate. Especially if you consider that a lot of our communication was, hi, I received chapter 8, here's what's wrong with it. So if you don't also say, so that shit's going to get real tired real quick if you don't also put in enough compliments. So there's the feedback sandwich technique, which is the feedback sandwich is you don't say chapter 8 sucks. You say something good, then the negative criticism, and then the positive thing. So it's, so when you're scolding an employee, you say, I really like the way you take initiative, but it's important to focus on our top 3 priorities and not these sub-projects that you keep getting distracted with. But keep me up to date on any sub-projects that you think are really important, because maybe we'll change our priorities. So that's the feedback sandwich. That's a free one. So negotiate hard on all the contracts. Hard, but not too hard. There's one negotiating situation where you can be an asshole. And that's the situation where you're never going to see the person again. So when you're buying a car, you can be an asshole because you're never going to see this person again. But this contract was the beginning of a relationship with our publisher and with my employer. So you don't want to start things off on the wrong foot. But ask for the things that you want, and if you think it's reasonable, stick to it. For example, we said we want an editable electronic copy when we're done so we can do the second edition. And we were told, that's really not a problem. We want our authors to do a second edition. We always give them the electronic copy. And we said, so let's add this paragraph. No, you really don't have to. It's our standard practice. Well, if it's your standard practice, you won't mind this paragraph that I wrote. Let's see. So we also used our salary negotiation tips on when we were negotiating our royalty rate and stuff. But as I said, don't try to write it for the money. Do retain a lawyer. And finally, is it ever done? It's never done. We kept thinking that we were done, and then it turned out not to be done because, I guess I don't have this slide. We thought we were done when we finished writing, but no, then there's the reviews. So we thought we were done when we incorporated all the suggestions from our reviewers, but no, then there's the proofreading. And we thought we were done then, and no, there's the formatting. And we thought we were done then, and no, then there's the publicity. They give you this form with 20 questions. What would you say to what should our salespeople say to the manager of a bookstore to help them understand this book? How would you sell this in academia? What would you say the competitors are? Blah, 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 blah. We had to do our own market research, essentially. This is a whole nother project. It's still not done. I'm touring the country. Tomorrow I'm doing the same talk in Palo Alto, California. for Bay Lisa, which gives me about, what? Yeah, since I'm flying out in the morning, that means I'm arriving like
You
4
pick up-
hours
You pick up
before.
3 hours.
I pick up 3 hours, but it would have been a lot easier if we'd done it the other way. Which is funny because Christine used to be very active in Bay Lisa, and she was going to do that presentation. So, but then she had a scheduling difficulty, so now I'm doing. So it's funny, I'm going to be on her old stomping ground talking about what's it like to write a book with that person you know. Remember Christine? She moved away 2 years ago to work on a PhD, started writing this book. This is what she's been doing. Oh, and she's engaged now. And they like, oh, absolutely. And I should say, in conclusion, working with someone you don't know can be very rewarding, and I found that she was a delight to work with, and I wouldn't be doing this tour if I had any kind of grudge against her. And I wouldn't be teaching these two tutorials at Lisa. So here's the plug, if I haven't done enough plugs already. But if you come to the Lisa conference, we're doing a full-day tutorial on technical tools for creating happy users, which is essentially the perception and visibility chapter, the help desk management chapter, debugging other people's problems, and system monitoring. Which, in other words, is you keep people happy by presenting yourself well, assuming that they're going to have problems, so you have a structure to handle those problems. Once they contact you, dealing with those problems in a structured and useful manner, and then monitoring the system so that you fix problems before they even report you. So there, you got the whole 6-hour tutorial in 2 minutes. And then we're doing a half-day tutorial on a small introduction to massive upgrades and changes, which is basically the whole change management section of the book that I talked about before. We're making one change to 1,000 machines, making 1,000 changes to one machine, and thousands of daily changes like on a WAN where you have one small but potentially dangerous change that you probably make every single day. How do you manage these things in a way that is, controls the chaos and gives you backup plans? So that's the whole talk. And now it's Q&A and then beer. And the website, which as we created, I took notes so I could write this web server chapter.
Just one question. I'd just like a rough count of hands. How many people are going to go to the Cambridge Brewery this evening? Okay. Jabber, you count that side. I'll count this.
Ooh, it's distributed computing.
6 over here.
Dual process. 14.
So that's roughly 20, 25. They're going to love us.
That's only double what we
Yeah, we normally have 8 or 10.
Wow, that's great.
Not usually crowded on a Wednesday night. You never know.
Can you send a copy of that, of your slides?
Say again?
Can I get a copy of your slides?
Then I won't be invited to as many places. Actually, you can get it. We're doing this presentation at Lisa, and this will go up on the website after that presentation. But generally, Lisa frowns upon giving out the slides until they've seen, you've done it for their audience.
We've got some discount flyers if you want to buy Tom's book.
Yeah, what's the 15% off? Excellent.
15% off when you order the book directly from Addison Wesley.
It's like $45, $46 on Amazon, so it's a...
Yeah, there's a huge number of used copies on Amazon, and this totally panicked me. So the book is available on Amazon day 1. Day 2, there's 2 used copies for sale.
Scalpers.
And so I panicked, and I sent email to both of them saying, "Hi, I'm the author. I hope, I was just curious about you selling the book. If you didn't like it, I'd love to make improvements." And I got email from both of them that was sort of like very angry. If you read the description, you would see that it's perfectly new condition. I haven't read it yet. I'm just selling it. I'm sorry. So I assume that these are people that work at Borders and are shoplifting. Because on day 2 they had copies used for sale, and now there's like 8 copies for sale, and so, which means about 0.1% of all the Borders in the world have employees in this situation, I guess. No, I shouldn't harsh out on people. Some of them are honest, mom and pop bookstores that just sell things through Amazon, and it has to be classified as used. But actually, the best part about that is that 2 months ago, Amazon had a bug in their system, and all the used prices were showing up twice as expensive. So it's like, you could get an Amazon price, $49, used, $107.
I had the same situation. I was going to buy a book for my daughter. Should have been about $3 or $4, and coming up with like $500.
You had your hand up first. Oh, maybe you didn't. Actually, then you did.
Yeah. Maybe I wasn't listening that good. Did you cover large-scale enterprise-wide authentication like LDAP or NIST2 or anything like that?
We don't get into the specific technologies. We do say that those are the good tools for creating that kind of structure. And we actually have a whole chapter on namespaces and how global namespaces are very important to keeping yourself sane, that you want consistent email addresses across the network, consistent authentication, and we do a number of anecdotes about how if all of your authentication systems tie back to one database, things become dramatically easier. So if your modem pool authenticates off the same thing as your Unix systems and your web servers, etc., then, for example, when you fire someone, you delete it from one database and then they're done.
What are large companies, just out of curiosity, for large Macy's authentication, like let's say Bell Labs where you work, or here at MIT, what is it that they use?
Bell Labs, most of our stuff used a handheld authenticator with...
what was the back end of it? Like LDAP?
The back end was actually... well, see, I wasn't in big Bell Labs. I was in Bell Labs Research, which is where the scientists are. So it was actually a text file kind of database in our own back end, running on Plan 9 servers. See, there's this great handheld authenticator from Accent, thank you, which is now...
No, Accent's who it is now. It used to be Secure now.
It was Secure something, then it's Accent. Accent's been bought by Synopsys. And if you remember those weird Beatrice commercials, anyway,
Oh, yeah.
soon everything's going to be owned by Nabisco. We were able to get a copy of the crypto system that it used, and Plan 9 has this awesome crypto library, and basically, I think David Prezzato looked at that and said, oh yeah, we just string together these 3 system, library calls in a row, and that's the algorithm. So we were able to develop our own server, and everything was based on that. It was fantastic. Lucent corporate-wide, I honestly don't know what they're using, but I would, oh, wait a minute. See, they're so big that just having all their modem pools on one database is quite an accomplishment. So they had, they bought Livingston, and therefore they were using Radius. So massive Radius stuff, big LDAP servers for the corporate directory. I haven't been there for 2 years, almost 3, so I'm guessing that it's all Active Directory now. Yes.
I just wanted to say, I've only had the book I got it 2 days ago, and I brought them here. And the thing that I really liked flipping through it is that it's not use this technology for this, use that technology for that. It's about why it's important to do certain things, and what are the advantages and disadvantages of different general techniques. I mean, I'm sure we've all dealt with a lot of sysadmins that, well, why are you using that command for that? Because, well, that's the command I always use for that. I don't know why. I don't know what the parameter does, but I do that and it works. And this is a lot more, making sure you understand the best way to do things, not what tools to do it in.
Right. Look for a global directory system with these qualities. And here's a list of bad qualities that you don't want to have, rather than use LDAP. Because I could use LDAP in the most egregious way And I'm using LDAP. Every cluster of 5 machines has its own LDAP server. And I decided I didn't like the schema, so I totally rewrote it. Yeah, so, other question? Yes?
How many copies of the book have you sold so far?
So that gets back to how low-tech the publishing industry is.
They don't know.
I get, every 6 months, I get statistics. It printed on the back of the check. And those statistics are 2 months old. So they have 2 months to total up that column of numbers. It's in the 3rd printing, and so that's approximately 15,000.
That number's just what they sold to bookstores, not what the bookstores sold to the user, right?
That's what's been shipped to bookstores minus the returns. And I think bookstores have a year to do their returns. So
They couldn't like return them all and end up saying, give us our money back?
they absolutely can. In fact, there's a big negative on, how many international returns, domestic returns, NAFTA returns. The Cheswick Belvin Internet Security and Firewall book actually got to the point that sales had sloped down, that they released the whole book electronically on their website. You can read the whole thing for free because A, they knew the 2nd edition was coming out soon, and B, the sales had gone down to the point where it was sort of break even. Yeah. Yes.
Do you actually believe the numbers they send you, though, to the best of their ability?
I really have to. I really don't have a choice. I would drive myself nuts if I... So I said, can I get monthly statistics even? And they said, oh, check your Amazon ranking. That's what most of our authors do. That's only for the books that Amazon sold. So we have this, cron job that collects hourly statistics off Amazon. You type make graph and you get the graph. But I noticed Amazon updates their statistics every day if your book isn't selling well, but if you're in the top 10,000, it's updated like hourly. And if you're in the top 100, it's like minute by minute updates. So when somebody wrote a review on Slashdot, and in one day we probably sold more books than like all of the days combined. We were actually in the Amazon top 100 for a week, and in the top 10 for, no, it was longer than that. 72 hours.
Hey, you owed me dinner.
So yeah, Amazon rankings is basically how we have to go. Though Amazon rankings don't count the used book sales, so.
That's sort of like when Schwarzkopf told everybody to watch CNN.
Oh, but we're now selling T-shirts and coffee mugs with the book cover off Cafe Press, and there we trust those statistics because it's 0. But zero except the ones we bought for ourselves. But so the problem is that people often say, Tom, I'm not as geeky as I want to be, and people make fun of me for not being geeky enough. So what can I do? And we say, well, buy the tote bag, which is if you go to everythingsysadmin.com and click on, I think, order it, you can order the coffee mug, the T-shirt, and the matching tote bag. So
to carry them in.
Drive those sales up to 1. No, we've sold like 20 so far, but it's because we bought coffee mugs for everyone at the publisher and the sweatshirt for mom.
It's an amazing site because you can just sign up at the cafe.com.
Oh,
just send them
cafepress.com is amazing. You send them an image, GIF or JPEG, and they right away it's available for sale on T-shirts and stuff, and they show you a virtual storeroom. They image map it onto the image of T-shirt, sweatshirt, coffee mug, mouse pad, coaster, and tote bag. So boom, you're there. Oh, and frisbee. So yeah, you just upload these images and.
Yeah, what's the URL again? The URL.
Cafepress.com. And so, yeah, I'm involved with some conferences and some other stuff, and there's no, you know, if you went to make t-shirts, you usually pay $100 or so for the screen process, but they have a direct, it's a dye sublimation process, so it's just printing directly onto t-shirts. Now, of course, that means that the prices are a little high, but they tell you the price. You set the profit margin, and they set the price. So we have this like very narrow margin because it's really, we want the publicity, we don't care about the money for that.
What format is this image supposed to be in?
GIF or JPEG,
Oh.
and they scale it. And it has to be a white background. That's the problem. They only will print on white t-shirts right now. So, you know. But they have white t-shirts with red sleeves.
SysAdmin with a white t-shirt?
Yeah, I know.
Come on.
So,
It only stays that way for a day.
Well, at least the morning.
more questions. Anyone here thinking about writing a book?
About what? Not anymore.
About writing a book? Has anyone written a book here? Isn't having written a book a great thing?
Having written,
Isn't the past tense? Having written a book is a great thing. Doesn't writing a book suck?
Yeah, I just collaborated in writing a porting guide from True 64 to HP UX. It's already 300 pages.
Yeah,
And it's
written
growing.
pamphlet, does that count?
What? Let's count. I'm also curious to make some demographics. How many people here are students? Interesting. And how many Linux? Raise your hand. FreeBSD? Or any of the BSDs? Solaris? Cool. I guess True 64? Digital Unix as opposed to that analog Unix. I think it's Adam's joke. Oh, you just leave me. Yeah, done that. Looking for a job.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh, have job openings. Oh, okay.
That's the one, get her! No.
Who uses Plan 9 or Inferno here? Really?
What if they didn't charge $1 million for the source code?
No. The source code is essentially free now. It's just if you're going to use it in a product, you have to pay.
They even have a VMware image of Plan 9 up.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
It's like 60 megs, you can just download it.
Just take the Chansky when you needed it.
Plan 9's cool.
And you mentioned guilt-free computing on a Mac. You can also just download blind, the Code Weavers edition. You can run Microsoft Office inside of Windows BSD with that.
Really? Even the newest
Just go
stuff?
online, the Windows emulator, and you download the Code Weavers edition. That's
Oh.
specifically targeted at Microsoft Office. You
Right.
can install and run it. Right. I don't use it. I run Suns.
I've got it running on my laptop.
Yes. Now that the lawsuit's basically over, we realize that the real monopoly is Office. It's not the operating system.
Yeah.
It's a shame. Other questions? And I think we're going to have beer.
No, it's all right.
Oh, cut me out. Thank you very much. People that raffled them off, exactly.
Excuse me, I won't stand up.
Yeah.
I'm not new anymore, but I've been keeping ISO images around at 72 up to date all that while.